Hello, everybody, and welcome to Stargate to the Cosmos. And I'm your host, Janet Lessin, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lessin. And we're here with our producer, Thomas Becker, also known as Amadpainter, and the world-famous Dr. Richard Alan Miller. We're going to talk about everything under the sun, moon, and stars, and then some. But one of the main focuses, we've had Dr. Miller on, about once every 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And he sent me a bunch of topics. One of the things that I want to really cover is the 5-stage society collapse. Are we in a collapse of our society? Is that what coronavirus is all about? But we'll talk about that in just a minute. Dr. Sasha Lessin. Hi, you there?
Well, I like the idea that Bridgerton had that systems have energy running through them causing perturbations, and when they become great enough, the system breaks apart or it reorganizes at a higher level.
So welcome back to the show, Dr. Richard Alan Miller. How are you today?
You may call me Rick. Engineers go by Dick, and physicists go by Rick. Please. No doctors. I've got so many doctorates, I forgot to count them. I really appreciate you coming back. It was very nice to talk to Thomas Becker. Amadpainter has been my friend for a very long time, and now he's got a tremendous responsibility put on him because of the death of that. What was the guy's name? He was
Hawk. His nickname was Hawk.
That's right. Yeah. I didn't know him very well. I knew Amadpainter, but because he's always producing a lot of the different shows, and I've been doing shows for a long time, but not under the flag that I'm currently flying, with my Dr. Richard Alan Miller. I used to broadcast in other things. I did a thing a couple nights ago with Gary Anderson out of Gig Harbor, and I've known Gary since 1975.
So what were you talking about? What do you want
well,
to
focus on tonight? He's got a little radio station that goes to, a network like you guys do. And I hadn't talked with Gary in probably 20 years, and we hooked back up because of what I'm doing now with the new university. This coronavirus it's difficult to know what's real, whether or not the isolation is important or not, whether the virus is real or not. And the kinds of information that are available, one doesn't know. You don't automatically believe anybody because of the disinformation in previous years coming on. But even still, there's the unknown. And so you don't really know how to behave one way or the other. And a lot of the people that are protesting now are being seen by the general public as being crazy. They might be. I don't know. What I do know is none of this is real. And what we're being told isn't real. What is real, I don't know yet. But I can tell you that what we have now is a potential opportunity to change things into a better system. In the old Beatles statement, everything happens for a reason and everything leads to something better. And what we're going to do is try to take the spin on this terrible, terrible thing that's happened and somehow make something better out of it. For example, let me give you an example. This is like food. Everybody, including Hawaii, is guilty of just-in-time delivery. Now, that means that basically you are right now eating probably 3% of the food that you produce yourself. And the rest of it is coming from gosh knows where. China, Mexico, California, who knows? But your food is not grown locally. Now, what's wrong with that scenario? Well, a grid down situation or this coronavirus is exhibit A. What's going to happen is that you're not going to get access to your meds that you need for heart medicine, blood thinners, whatever. That means the first thing that we should all be thinking about is growing our own herbal pharmacy. And that means, if you're on meds of some kind, the likely is 85 to 90% of those are coming from China. What's the credibility of you depending on China to produce your life-giving needs for medication? And there's an example of where we need to rethink ourselves. Chattanooga, the city of Chattanooga, brought me in 2013 and had me do 7 workshops and a bunch of talks over the city over a 2-month period, where today, as a result, 7 years later, Chattanooga now is producing 40% of the food they consume. Every single restaurant on the Chattanooga River has a greenhouse next to it. The center of town was at one time a large 200-year-old farm, family farm, that is now the farmer's market. That farmer's market has a stock exchange on surplus things each day, on what didn't sell and what's in abundance, in terms of food inventories locally. And that's the city of Chattanooga doing their logo, which is right here, right now. And if I can somehow convince children that the greenhouse, the sandbox, is the most important part of their life, what a change that we could do where we started eating local food again, where it was grown locally. And that's one of the goals I'm going to try to do this next couple of years, is to teach children how to do aquaculture systems through a university that we have.
Dr. Rick, I have a question for you. When I was a child, you could drive anywhere in 5 minutes and you get to a farm. So I was born in 1954. And I know that Sasha, who was born in 1940, during World War II, they had the Victory Gardens. So everybody knew how to grow food. Food was rationed. They would trade food. What happened? You and Sasha have this overview.
What happened is a good question. Let me tell you this. The first thing I do when I hit the islands is I look for a free avo tree or a papaya, just to know I'm back in Hawaii, because food grows everywhere. And it's like you couldn't starve in Hawaii because everything is edible. In fact, that was one of the things I liked about Hawaii, except for the red ants that finally got in there, is that nothing in Hawaii was poisonous. That was one of the big logos of Hawaii, and then there was the tourism, and then you got your red ant and all the rest of it. But food is everywhere. And so the first thing I do when I get off the aircraft is I go look for an avocado tree, one that's maybe 60 feet tall and has a couple thousand avocados, just huge avocados, just to know I'm back home in Hawaii. I miss that part.
Well, we have an avocado tree, but it doesn't bloom all the time. I mean, there's not always avocados.
No, it's grafted. The same has different parts of it go off at different seasons, even though it's grafted on the same base.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen that part. And I remember I was going to get married in the city of Refuge, and then I looked at what was happening there and chose not to. I love Captain Cook. I was wanting to always get married on board a ship off in the harbor there. There's this dive that we used to do with snuba, and there was this eel that would come out at you on one of those little cracks. I'd like to take my friends down there and scare the bejesus out of them. It was fun. I knew a friend. She was a Japanese-born Hawaiiana that was growing up on Kerry Watson's place. She was growing avocado trees, and they had coffee. And I remember picking the coffee and the different cherry blossoms that would happen on that. And I miss the islands, but it's so easy to live there that I would never have gotten anything done. So I always went there for a vacation, chill out. I don't know what's going to happen with the coronavirus. I think that MIT has just published a paper that's kind of interesting, that if we lax for the moment and release the curfews, that there will be a secondary follow-up. Is that true or not? I can tell you that anything you can imagine, including conspiracy, is probably true and more. Which means if it's a conspiracy, they'll make sure there is a second pandemic. Now, is the pandemic real? The statistics would say that it's not. That's basically listening. What people really want is a local testing area where an expert that they trust says that it's safe or not. You can't trust the government, whether it's Democratic or Republicans, and you can't trust the WHO, the World Health Organization. All of it's bogus. And I know that the Bilderbergers were holding conferences in October, planning this exact event 5 months before here we are today. Now, does that mean that the virus is real?
This. Right. Well, okay. Let me just ask you a question about this, because we had the flu of 1918, the Spanish flu. We've had other pandemics. You can tune into any show about the Dark Ages or Victorian times either, and the plague would circle around and kill a bunch of people, and then another year or two go by and it would kill some more. So we have a history in our planet of these plagues, of these pandemics, and something always survives, and then a bunch of people die, and they have a bunch of mass graves, and trying to prevent it from coming back again. So we have that story that's in the human psyche, and then we have all these conspiracies. So
there's a part that disturbs me is the statistics of how many people who died from the virus, and you will find that there haven't been anybody dying of the virus itself, but of secondary problems that they had, like pneumonia or just plain old age. And that statistic is being played on us.
Dying, but today a story came through that a 5-year-old died, and so we have these stories, and there's all these people dying or not dying, and then the story is that it affects you. It can affect your brain, any of your organs, your heart. So yeah, your lungs. So they keep coming up with stories on top of stories of how this virus works, and we actually have nobody really studying it objectively. Everybody's in panic mode.
That's correct. So, and that's the problem. We don't know because the news reporting is unreliable. And nobody trusts it anymore. I remember when it was Walter Cronkite. And when Dan Rather came on, then I started looking over at CNN and some other stations. And now you can't even trust CNN at all. And so everybody has an agenda. And everybody has a reason for causing a spin. The problem is it's taking away our civil rights. And is that good or bad? Well, it was Benjamin Franklin that said that when you give up your civil rights for safety, you lose both.
So is there really anything we can do if they're going to control our seeds? So, if you didn't get your seeds ordered by now, you're not going to be able to get seeds really soon.
Well, I think that if you are at home and you're not doing anything, why not start a garden for the first time? Learn how to produce at least a little bit of the food you're consuming at home. And if you have children, see, that's who our children, in my humble opinion, are our single most important natural resource. And we're already screwing them with cursive and the removal of our school systems. I mean, I remember a time when we had shop and home economics and mechanical drawing and other kinds of skill sets. They are no longer teaching children in school. And today, because of the coronavirus, they've cut the school year down even more. Now, what do you think that's going to do to our natural resource? These are the kids that are going to push us around when we're old and in wheelchairs. I'm not at all pleased with what's happening. And if I ever find out what actually happened, and we won't, because look at Kennedy and 9/11. What actually happened in 9/11? Did it happen? Well, I know for a fact the Pentagon didn't happen, and yet nobody has pointed that out publicly. It didn't get hit by an aircraft. And Building 7, how does that work? And, there's a bunch of issues that will never be resolved. And I'm going to remind you of Travis Stock and the concept of gang stalking protocols, where you never, ever really know what happens. And that alone is a psychological damper that gives control. Oh, there's something wrong with him. Look at him and his behavior. He doesn't know what happened. It's terrible what's going on. And if I ever find out, I will be the wrath of God. Let me tell you, as a scientist and a nerd, I will not cease until everybody understands the terribleness of what these individuals are doing, trying to control society. Now, you know that's happening. We all do.
Dr. Rick, so let's say they get absolute control, and they want to go back. Let's just go there for a moment. That they get absolute control of the entire planet, down to everything we do. They've got drones. They can monitor your facial recognition. They put little nanobots in you. You become a cyborg. You can't travel anymore without your papers. You can't travel anymore without your. Oh no! They're gonna put the little chip in us. So we're all gonna get chipped in the mark of the beast. Then what? They've got absolute control. What does that really do for them? We're not going to be creative anymore.
I'm not understanding part of what I'm getting old in my diver's ears. I have scar tissue, and so I don't hear very well. Please excuse me if I don't understand some. Yeah.
What I'm saying is, hypothetically, we imagine that they get what they want. They want absolute and total control of every aspect of our society.
They already have it.
I think they already have it, but we've had the illusion that we're free.
Well, here's one point to remember. James Hillman said, control is a fantasy. Even when you think they have control, they absolutely not necessarily do. It is a fantasy because at some point, you're just going to say no. And when that happens, how are they going to stop you? They're going to kill you? If enough people say no, it isn't going to be a controllable situation. And I don't know how this is going to play, but at some level, while they have tried to encroach on our civil rights, I believe we have an opportunity. I think it's time for everybody to realize that our food system needs to be revisioned. I think that we need to start producing our own food again so that this kind of situation does not interfere with our livelihood. I think that subways and going to work where you have 2 hours of rush hour traffic to get to work is nuts. And to live like that is an opportunity now to change things where you're working more at home, more in a virtual situation. Medicine. When you talk about these individuals that are on the front lines, that's the new war with nurses and other things putting themselves in harm's way to try to help society. And we need to recognize and honor that situation that they're currently facing.
Right. Sasha, any comments or feedback?
Well, I think that it's the common benign narrative that we have civil rights is not true. Also, when you look at who's got civil rights and who ain't got civil rights, you'll see it's only a privileged class at the most. Sometimes it included a cockroach capitalist, but since the Republicans have totally taken control of everything in this country, the pretense is even gone. It's so obvious to anyone who looks at the evidence that the Twin Towers were taken down by a planned event in order to have this Patriot Act passed and to kill Arabs and reassert American hegemony over Iraq. It's not a matter of evidence, but it's an interesting thing. We were talking to Bernie Gillis the other day, and he's saying, the people that die have chosen to die, and they have their reasons to, and it's within each person's choice. And I've been stuck with that idea. Is that really so? Do you choose it? It seems like it makes sense to me.
I'm glad that I live in North America rather than Africa. Can you imagine what it would be like right now in Nigeria?
Yeah.
I mean, get a grip. While you're right, it's like civil rights. The blacks are still segregated in the South. There are serious problems there. And women's suffrage, in terms of the credibility of a woman's production compared to that of a man, it's changing. It's not perfect. It's a process. You really, in most cases, never really get to the door when Simon says you can go halfway. But it's in metaphor, and while things are not good, we have an opportunity to make things better than they were. And one of the places I'm going to focus on is food production. Now, once you have that, that's something you did not have before that now, as a result of this coronavirus, you do. And it's time you start to rethink why you did what you did and what you thought was freedom. Now, I don't have the answers. I don't. What I do know is it's not going to be you or me that makes these changes. It's going to be our children. And so what I want to do is what Crosby, Stills, and Young sang: teach your children well, because that's our future, our children. And what they've done, whoever that is limited their education and reduced things that you and I remember when I was in school, I'm 76, and when I was in second grade, they required Latin. They don't even teach that anymore. And that's one of the reasons I was able to easily go into agriculture, because of sum est, sunt. I can tell you that Latin was a way of speaking a second language. And children are, as I said, our most important natural resource. And we should be taking care of that first and foremost in the educational systems. And once that's done, everything else will follow in suit, because it's a process. And education is the key, in my humble opinion. That's where I'm coming from. So if we can't teach them in a physical location, then I'm going to open up Albert Schweitzer University on Beltane, and I'm going to teach a Harry Potter-like school on metaphysics. And the first place I'm going to start with children is the production of food to make them sovereign. My father said there were three ways of being in this world. There was the vulgar, the adept, and the exempt. And the vulgar get audited, and the adept gets money back from the government, and the exempt has a 501c3. They don't pay taxes. Once you start producing your food, what's next? Water? That's right. Matt Stein said, quote, there's 3 minutes here for air, 3 days for water, and 3 weeks for food. What's important? So we're going to start with the difference in qualities. With the cities closing down, you'll notice the air quality is already changing. There's an advantage that we forgot to look at. And when you talk about water and the production of water, what I've done is I've built a school bus, a mobile water testing laboratory that's run by third graders. And they go to the grade schools and they teach first graders how to test for turbidity and purity of water for drinking. And that's called the Caterpillar. And I'm going to tell you that once these children are given that level of empowerment, good luck with these control mechanisms. Silence.
You're going to start this
Didn't mean to. It's cool what's happening, because if we take advantage of this situation, there is no stopping us. And our children, in my opinion, are going to be first. So I'm going to teach them metaphysics right out of the gate. They're smarter than we are. And the only thing is, we're more experienced. But experience, by definition, includes limitation. And that's a concept where the child doesn't know something can't be done. And what I have discovered is that all the different altered states of consciousness, the laws of physics change. There's never going to be a TOE. It doesn't work like that. Theory of everything. Imagination is reality, and it's once you let the child unloose, watch what happens next. I think they let the cat out of the bag without knowing what they're doing. And the Bilderbergers and the rest of them are going to get caught with their shorts down and dumbfounded because of the potential opportunity. If we start focusing on our children and food production, the whole mess that we're currently enjoying has served its purpose.
Right. So that's what we talked about earlier, that the perturbation comes in and disrupts the chaotic situation. It becomes so perverse, it's no longer growing, expanding, or devolving rather than evolving. So we need the perturbation to break everything down, reconstruct at a higher level of order. So that's one of the things that can emerge when we come out the other side is we get back to the land, we get back to growing our own food. That was part of the movement of the 60s. That was a child. We got to get back to the nature.
Something where you have more personal power, more empowerment, where you feel safer with yourself because you know how to do something that you didn't know how to do previously. Growing your own food. Forming your own pharmaceuticals.
Their own food. Like if you're living in a city, and there's a lot of people living in cities, there's these tower gardens, you have your porches, your decks, you have potentially community gardens. What are some of the solutions for all those people that are in,
all the skyscrapers in New Jersey, just across the river from New York? Every single one of them has a garden on the roof. Every single skyscraper in New Jersey next to New York City. And they're producing food for the cafeterias. And that's the first place that starts. But I wouldn't want to be in a city. Can you imagine living 6 floors up, the power's out for 1 week, and you have to go take a bathroom? How's that going to work? See, cities may need to be revisioned in terms of how we live with each other, in terms of socialness and our next, the difference between living in the country and living in the city. I don't have the answer to this yet. This is something that's going to, knock on wood, evolve. But I think that there's enough of you out there that have some ideas on how to do this. We have natural farmers. What we have is the farmers market now. And Chattanooga has the stock exchange that we developed that now has a list every day of surplus foods that you can get cheaper. So there's possibilities.
Here, there's a lot of people that grow food. Lots of people. We have farmers markets, and even though we import, we still have papayas, bananas, garden food, and they bring it to market at base. So they started to buy from the local farmers, and then they're giving it away to anybody who shows up. They have a line in the car. You drive up, and they give you a couple bags of groceries, so of farming, of veggies and stuff like that, fruits. So, but that's here. I mean, each system is. We're going to have.
It's going to be slightly different. That's why you have the Oppenheimer Ranch project in Colorado, and just south of that you have the Arapahoe missile silo. That's a 60-foot vertical garden run by 12 families that now produces more than 2,000 food for 2,000 people. You say each habitat is different. That was the whole concept of Gurdjieff when he said, eat your environment. People that live on the coast eat fish. People that live in the Midlands eat grains. It's a habitat-sensitive situation. And what Matt Stein and I did before his untimely death is we set up a network across North America of sustainable lifeboats. The one in Chattanooga is up in Cloudland. It's a monolithic dome, a model on how to live in an environment that's changing. We now have, for example, a 3D printer up on Bainbridge Island that will print a geodesic dome, a 30-foot geodesic dome in special porous concrete with magnesium in 24 hours. Habitats are available, and how we choose how we want to live is probably going to be based on the weather and other kinds of environmental situations. Up in Sandpoint, Idaho, I have Peaceable Kingdom, an old Quaker retreat that was built by Joe White, who is the protege of Frank Lloyd Wright. And his roof is 10 feet of earth, which is his garden. He's got his protection from what the Hopi say when the Hopi said you're going to need 10 feet of earth between you and the sun. There's every single habitat is different and dictates with personalities why you want to build your house this way and you want to do your food production that way. What I'm doing today and yesterday and then tomorrow is we're filming for sixth graders how to build a vertical aquaculture system that goes from my first floor up to my second floor and then into my kitchen. It was Bill Mollison that said that if your garden is less than 60 feet from your kitchen, you will use everything in your garden. You clip it off as a way of living. And I'm going to be doing this as a little video as the first classes I teach at Albert Schweitzer for children. Once they see how to do this, watch what they do next.
Right. So we need to have basically how do you retrofit in every environment, every type of habitat. We have all these empty box stores now. Those can be. We already put a lot of time, energy, money, resources into building a lot of things that are abandoned now. Are you addressing that issue? How can we take things that already exist, or do we have to tear everything down again and rebuild? Can we?
It's an evolutionary process. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to probably get halfway to the door and then never get to the door and miss the journey. That's what we all need to focus on. What's really important in what we do with our actions. And we focus on the wrong aspects of it, and we miss the forest and the trees. The children don't. They get everything.
Right.
That's what I'm so excited about. I taught metaphysics at Harvard for 11 years, a graduate level course. John Mack took my third course and started his alien abduction studies. Imagine what would happen if I tailored those metaphysical lessons for children and where they're going to go with my teachings. It's a question of understanding our role and position in things. And basically what I'm going to be is a facilitator, not a teacher. I'm going to try to provide the tools necessary for them to build their own sandbox.
So won't the parents be involved as well? Is it just going to be children, or are you going to engage the whole family?
I'm holding this as close as I can, and I'm not getting what you said. I'm so sorry. I apologize.
Are you going to involve the whole families or just the children? What role will the parents have?
I'm going to open this school for children, and adults are welcome to join in if they'd like. I have a guy that came from northern China. He's going to teach northern Shaolin forms of street walk etiquette. Stefan Verhoeven, He's Northern Shaolin, and he's going to teach sidewalk behavior, how you treat a bully. What you do is give these kids empowerment, and then let them use those tools the way they determine, because that's where our evolution is going to lie, not in what we do, but what they do from our facilitating them. It's not like Cloud Atlas, but it's like that. A 4-year-old is way, way smarter than an adult. They're just inexperienced. It's the experience part that limits us also. That's the part that's so exciting, to realize it's going to be a wide open circus for children. They're going to have a field day.
So are you going to have besides your property, are you going to have an experimental community where they can do this stuff?
Well, we're going to talk about, herbal pharmacy and what medicines you can find in the forest. Just one of the American Indian concepts is wherever there was a toxin in the forest, the antidote grew right next door to it. It's the way you look at your universe. And everything has a reason for being there, including toxins. In fact, toxins are not toxins at all. Let me give you an example. Psychedelic mushrooms. Right now, there's a big excitement about psychedelic mushrooms in healing. And yet, the psychedelic mushroom itself is a toxin. Psilocin and psilocybin are toxins to the body. However, they are very similar in lookalike chemistry to neurotransmitters in the brain. And when you take that toxin, in minor quantities, it freaks the brain out, and the brain overproduces these neurotransmitters. And these neurotransmitters that are lookalike to what you find in psychedelic mushrooms, they are resonant cavity oscillators that dialogue with subtle bodies outside the physical body. One of the bodies you might be familiar with is called chi, where it's structured water inside a microtubule that leaves the body at the moment of death. At the moment of death, there is a 5-gram weight loss in everyone. What is that? Hammeroff has suggested it's a microtubule, and Jerry Pollack suggests it's got structured water in it. Now, 5 grams of structured water is 1 million times more efficient than the current computer chip in your computer using gallium arsenide or gallium and arsenic. And when you have structured water, that's enough for 100,000 lifetimes of memory as a metaphor. So we don't even have a clue yet what we're talking about in terms of space and time, the matrix, and or what's actually happening with consciousness. I can tell you this, imagination is reality. And once you see something in your mind's eye, that's what makes it real. And a child gets that much quicker than you or I. And imagine where they're going to go with their imagination. It's very exciting, the possibilities because of this virus that's happened. And what I want to do is put a spin on it so we come out of this with something happened for a reason and it led to something better.
Okay, so that is what the ETs say is the main reason why humans are so valuable, is that we can image things. We have imagination. A lot of other species.
That's what made us God's favored. The uniqueness of choice. That is correct. And basically, just because you and I see things differently, that's what makes God's favored. Man had the choice and the diversity that created from that. Imagination is reality, and anything that you could imagine is true, is not only true, it's even more so, and that's only halfway to God. Physics doesn't have the answers. When I ask you what color that fence over there is, right out of the top, you make an assumption. Oh, well, it's brown. But you have presumed the other side, which you cannot see, is the same color. And that's where physics starts. It makes assumed truths, like the shortest distance between 2 points. Space and time are illusions. They're constructs in the mind. They're not real. And when I say that, that's why quantum mechanics has moved to holographic systems. Because in a quantum system, when you measure something in time and space, you have taken an analog system and converted it into a digital one with particles and waves. And the bottom line is, that's when you insert an uncertainty principle that Heisenberg talked about. And the more you know about one thing, the less you know about something else. And that is the limitation of quantum mechanics and quantum consciousness. It's like you can't get there from here. Now, a holographic system looks at universes in terms of information and resolution of information. So IQ would be the physical world, and EQ is the next level of information on how you feel about the physical plane, emotional plane. And so it is the way information goes down into and out of itself. The bad news is, again, information is not what you really think it is, because there's a theorem that states if you have enough information to ask a coherent question, you have enough information to answer it. It is in the framing of the question where the answer lies. And so that limits what information is and is not, because, again, information is just like space and time. They're constructs and the limitation of the way man thinks. When I did John Lilly's labs back in the 70s for Carl Sagan, I determined that the dolphin's language was a form of Clifford algebra. It turns out less than 2 months ago, some new studies have shown that dolphins are not talking languages. They're sending holographic images. They're talking words, and images are 1,000 words. Their language is way, way more evolved than man. And man's language concept goes back 20 million years. So there are, in one sense of the word, mammals on this planet that are more evolved than man. We are not the center of this universe. And newsflash, orca has a cerebral cortex that's literally twice the size of man. And that mammal is firing 60% of it, not 10. That mammal is better designed for its environment and habitat and can go further on Earth than man can. And dolphin, who is also, I can't draw a force cetacean that have bigger brain cases than man. And I have watched an elephant in Indonesia paint itself, showing an awareness of self that man doesn't have. So, our bird brains, are birds aware? I have a squirrel that knows how to manipulate me and feeding it every day.
Right. So what's going on that an elephant can paint its own picture? That's amazing. That always amazed me. The elephant can paint a picture of an elephant. And
I've seen that. Yeah, have you seen that pictures where the elephant is painting itself?
They have YouTubes of the elephant painting itself.
Yeah, it's remarkable. That elephant is depicting an awareness of the way other people see it, way more than man can. So I question, what technology is. Thumb and fire. The dolphin do not have a thumb and they don't have fire, but their technology, what they do for art form, is this thing called sonoluminescence, where they blow these little sonar bubbles. And Mark Leclerc is studying that now at MIT as a form of cold fusion, and that's one of the dolphins' play toys.
Oh, interesting.
It's interesting. You have a dolphin rehab center like we did down in Florida. I went to Dolphins Plus, became aware of how smart dolphins are, even after Lily's lab. This handler was having this dolphin pull me through the water, on its fin. And the dolphin knew that my arm was artificial. I have a left arm. It has no bone in it. It was from an old war injury when I was a Navy SEAL. And this dolphin knew that because of sonar and pulled me differently than it would have otherwise. Ignored the handler. Pulled me correctly. It's an interesting world. And we think we're in the center of it. And we're not. There's something more going on here. And that's what we're supposed to discover. And that's probably not going to be me that does that. It'll be my great-grandson.
So the dolphins communicate telepathically and in concepts. Is that what you said?
Well, it isn't so much telepathic. It's like right now what we do know, the clicks and whistles is a form of not Clifford algebra. It's a holographic image that they're sending. And that was confirmed 2 months ago. They're sending images.
Okay.
They're not talking. They're sending images. Now, holographic is different than thinking with the gut. There is ESP. I wrote a book on that in training Navy SEALs, how to think with the gut. Instinct. When you come from that place, you do not make mistakes by definition. And you're closer to purpose than intent. Intent is when you're coming from a place of wounding. You have an alley, your glass is half empty. When you come from a place of purpose, you are no longer visible to AI, for example. You can't write an algorithm to have an AI be able to figure out who and where you are, because you're not in conflict by definition with anything. You are here because you chose to. And it's all about food chain and working in the string of being in harmony with everything. And purpose over intent.
So, wow.
I know. I'm giving you some things to think about. Doesn't mean I'm right. But they're where I am at this moment in understanding our place in the universe. And, imagine me giving that to a child and where that child's going to go with it. It's very exciting.
Well, we get so polluted with our education, which is really just entrainment, mind control. We're being educated right out of the ability to think for ourselves and to figure things out. So
it's a double-edged sword. It's like cuts both ways. Because while there's entrainment, there's also inflamement, where you become inflamed with something that you're studying. And there's no stopping that part. Man on fire.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about restructuring education, restructuring our cities, our towns, our culture. That's a big job. And I understand you said you don't think you'll go to the finish line with that. So we need a place to begin. And so you're starting, you said you're making a film to start introducing these concepts. You've got a crew filming with you right now, right? They're at your house?
Yes, I'm at my home. I'm going to run my classroom from my home, and I'm going to have Stefan run his classroom from Winnipeg, and I'm going to have, hopefully Janet Lessin teaching from Hawaii, and a virtual campus for children. By the way, I would love to have you participate if you've got some ideas on what you would like to do with children. I have a sense you do real well.
Well, the thing is, I don't even know any children anymore. I'm so old. There's no children around.
Well, that's how you get younger. Being around children makes you younger. Trust me when I tell you that. I don't feel 76. Do I sound 76?
Now, do you have grandchildren?
I have great-grandchildren, believe it or not. My granddaughter just had a boy. And my great-grandfather was Rudolf Steiner's Lodge Master, which means I'm a legacy to Waldorf, and that's why I feel the way I do about children, because I've been mentoring children most of my life.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't really have children around me, but I like children. They're fun. But it'd be interesting to see what they think of me. Well, we're game. Sure. Whatever we can do for the cause. Sasha.
Well, I think you can start with your own inner child and
the
allow the play
child. There it is.
Parts of yourself to express themselves in the vulnerable parts too, because they're the key to seeing why you misperceive others, because it's just the reflection of your defensive parts that are protecting the vulnerable child. And once you become conscious of the process, the unconscious intention, which is what you're always getting, turns into purposiveness because you understand, and there's not so much unconscious intention, but you see that everything is intentional because everything involves relationship. And so you just become
That is one way of looking at it. I studied with James Hillman and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. James Hillman was my primary lead, and so I am third generation imaginal. There's many different ways. And Dr. Stanley Krippner was my mentor, which was humanistic. He started Saybrook. And so I'm dedicating this new book, The Non-Local Mind in a Holographic Universe, in his living memory. He's the one that introduced me to Edgar Mitchell, so I was at Mission Control in 1971 to do the initial studies on ESP that led to the concept of its relationship to hypnosis and altered states of consciousness. Everybody has ESP. It's just we have been culturally programmed to ignore it. My girlfriend of 6 years can touch my body and now know what part of my body is in pain. I don't know how she does it. Intuition, that's what we call it. But really, it's a type of first brain, the gut, the instinctual parts. The upper brain that we've associated with the mind gives you the balance of science and religion. That's why it has two brains up there, and both of them are the same in one sense of it, because at one time in history, religion was science. The Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, is a book on science that relates sound to words. And I have been to Tibet for the military, studying the Buddhist ability using these big long horns. They get 17 of them in a certain geometric array, and they compress sound to such an extent that it absolutely lifts large boulders that you can push with a finger. We've been here before. We have different technology.
That's how Joshua knocked down the walls of Jericho. Joshua knocked down the walls of Jericho with just the sonar.
Exactly.
Mentioned.
That's right. The horn. The horn of Jericho. I know that there are technologies we haven't even remembered. That's what I used to do for the military, study the paranormal for them. I have a book that will be coming out on the work I did for MRU when I was working under Dr. Carl Schleicher, a.k.a. the Smoking Man. He was at his desk, in the same desk on Wisconsin Avenue, for 48 years. Imagine that man and what he did. He's the one that did Tavistock and Montauk. Everything that occurred on the East Coast, he did the studies on. He had me do everything on the West Coast, and I went all the way down from SRI into China Lake and other places. I have seen things. I have no idea what they mean, but it has led me to this moment, and where I now believe our children are going to be the salvation of this earth.
Well, we will pick up after this break, which is coming up in about 10 seconds here. And you've been listening to Lessin and Dr. Lessin and Calvin Miller on Stargate to the Cosmos. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Where's the music? Music. I think.
Sasha, I can barely understand you guys with my telephone. Is there a better way we can get a...
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry?
Hey, I'm sorry. I was on mute. Sorry, I forgot. Welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos, and I'm your host, Janet Kara Lessin, and my co-host is Dr. Sasha Alex Lessin, and my producer is Thomas Becker, also known as the Amadpainter. Our very special guest today is Dr. Richard Allen Miller, and we're going to talk about all kinds of good things the next hour here. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to go over to the revolution.radio donation button on the top left-hand tab and make your donation, your one-time donation. And if you want to make a recurring donation, go to the Patreon button and set that up, and that'll come out automatically once a month. And what would you like to say, Dr. Lessin? Say something.
Well, I still like to know those 5 stages that we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah, the 5 stages of society's collapse. You have 5 stages. So maybe you could go over that. And
you do that part. I can talk about our sustainable lifeboats more. The 5 stages is go ahead and outline that as I gave it to you, and then I don't have that in front of me.
I got it. So stage 1 is as long as the economy is thriving and you have freedom and are not overtaxed, life can be good. And it has your most important assets or savings, career, health insurance, home value, automobile, image, credit rating for debt accumulation. Well, it seems like that's already shot for most of us right now. Stage 2. That's probably been shot for many of us for a long time now. But anyway, we thought we were good. Okay. Stage 2, the economy goes into a prolonged decline, which we have been experiencing for the past 7 years. Okay, so that's probably where we've been. We've been
past
in this
40 years.
We've been in this prolonged decline for the last 40 years. And then your most important assets are cash, precious metals, which you might want to sell now, elimination of debt, job stability, health insurance, home equity, automobile with good MPG. Okay, stage 3. The economy begins to collapse after a significant prolonged decline, which we are experiencing right now. Okay, you don't have pandemic built in this thing, but let's go. Your assets are your cash, automobile. Let me see. How do I go to the next page? Hold on. Well, maybe I can't go to the next page. Hold on. Next page. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Job, home, short-term food supplies, survival know-how, rural property. Well, not everybody's in that. Small livestock, chicken, fish, rabbits, and a bulk supply of long-term heirloom vegetable seeds. Okay, so here we are. Stage 4, the economy collapses and the shelves go empty in 1 week, and the government suspends the Constitution, and we become a police state. This can come any time after stage 3. So we're not quite in stage 4.
It's when the election is either canceled or he declares national emergency and there's no more. And we're very close to that.
Okay.
With martial law.
So and we're kind of like there right now.
So
society is chaos.
Yeah, go ahead.
And then we can talk about that. Then we can read stage 5 later. Your most important assets will be guns and ammo, survival knowledge, short-term food supplies for 1 year, rural hideaway or rural property, a trained survival dog. Can we train cats? Homemade water filter system, survival gardening method know-how, airloin. Airloin, that's what I'm saying. Heirloom. I can't read. Garden seeds for long-term food. can no longer sell gold. You can no longer buy gasoline for your vehicle. You'll be forced from your home, and healthcare is no longer available. And of course, your job is a memory. You will experience what it's like to live in a third world country at war. Kind of somewhere in there. Go ahead, talk about that now, Rick. Dr. Rick.
Well, yes. Okay. Well, basically, allotropic medicine is broken. One size does not fit all. Each of us is unique. That's what's wrong with medicine and dentistry. My bridge broke. I look like a hillbilly right now. I need to get my teeth fixed, and I can't. Money, this is one of the reasons the pandemic happened, is that the Fed was fed up. I mean, it's gone. And how do we get rid of paper money? Well, we contaminate it. And so now we're going to have to go into some other kind of currency or barter system that, if we're clever, will be better than the way the Fed ran things. Now, I don't know how that's going to play. I'm primarily focusing right now, my part is education and whom we educate. And that's where I'm, drawing my lines. Basically, we needed a change. Everybody knew that what we were doing is not going to continue working. Money, food production with just-in-time delivery, the Teamsters and oil with trucks on the freeway is wrong. But there it was. And that's our society, and nobody wanted to change, so it was forced on us. Now we have an opportunity to rebuild it in a better way. We won't. What we'll have are pluses and minuses, just like the old system. But, for example, food is one thing you all know you should have been doing, is growing your own garden. Because each of us have different foods we like to eat. And there it is. I love the islands because you guys eat a lot more fruit than we might up here in Oregon. Now, beyond that, your herbal farmers, everything, there was no national debt. Basically, what was happening is everything came from China. And there was a distinction made between storable and non-storable commodities. Non-storable commodities are what you produce each year for that year's needs. And if you do that on a more local level, there's a lot better decentralized. There's a lot better chance of it not failing across the board globally. And so we have an opportunity to change the way we do our food. We have an opportunity to change the way we do our medicine and medical supplies. Instead of, I would say, Walgreens and these other drugstores, 90% of all pharmaceuticals come from China. When I was in the 90s farming, I had friends growing feverfew for migraine headaches out of California, Northern California. They would ship bales of feverfew to China, where it was capsulated and tableted and shipped back to Costco as Centrum. Now, what's wrong with that system? And so to be able to not do tablets and capsules, today I have a new corporation that we've started up in Edmonton, growing chaga, mushroom, and other polysaccharide-like mushrooms, pharmaceutical mushrooms, that are now being used in Israel to enhance coffee. These are different kinds of diets where our food choices are changing that are toward a more healthier form. Why is chaga used against these different kinds of things? Because it has polysaccharides in it, which activate or deliver oxygen to the cell through the cell wall directly into the body, creating ATP, which is where cold fusion occurs. And so these little quark gluon plasmas in the body is the finest laboratory there is. And if you eat correctly, you have no need for things like supplements. And everybody's body is different. And so everybody's needs are different. What's healthy for one person is an illness for another. And that's where medicine is wrong. And if you were to grow your own pharmaceutical garden, what I would call an herbal pharmacy, rather than using warfarin for your blood thinner, you could be using chloitinase, which is an enzyme that comes out of pharmaceutical mushrooms. You grow your mushroom, and you have your blood thinner right there out of the garden. Now, everything originally came from the earth. And these old German forms of targeted chemistry, standardized extract, it's now giving way to a new thing called full spectrum, where you take a cultivar, a product that has been climatized to a given region, like let's say aspen bark and aspen leaf, which is a good source for acetylsalicylic acid. It turns out that those aspen bark and aspen leaf also have an unrelated buffer. That's why we call it full spectrum. And there's something more going on with our food systems and medicines that we have previously not taken into account, that God somehow has synchronistically and serendipitously offered alternative medicines in crops that grow right in your neighborhood. And all your medicines that you would need as a supplement for whatever reason because of dietary incorrectness is right there at your hand. And it just takes a little while to recognize that. And while as adults, we're not capable of doing that completely, I'm going to guess our children will be able to get it real quick. And that will be called probably full spectrum over standardized extract as the way of delivery. It turns out you take a mushroom and you run it through a jet engine at Mach 3, and you now have a 400 nanometer product that you can sprinkle on the top of your chest and let gravity let it deliver directly to the lung. It doesn't have to go through digestive processes. It's a new delivery system in pharmacy. And I can tell you, it's mechanical, it's cheap. A simple way to produce it. And Coca-Cola Asia, out of China right now, is putting Cordyceps sinensis in Coca-Cola products in Asia as a sugar substitute to cane sugar. Used to be cocaine, then we went to cane sugar, and now we're working with pharmaceutical mushrooms as the sugar substitute. And so the future is redefining.
Is that a good thing? Is that healthier, you're saying?
Well, okay. In pharmaceutical mushrooms, you have sugars that are little tiny molecules. A sugar molecule is a little tiny thing here. And then you have a thing called beta-glucans, which are complex sugars that look like a large virus or a small bacteria. And if you add transfer factors to that cocktail, usually you take 6 pharmaceutical mushrooms to get a broad spread of these beta-glucans, and you add transfer factor to that, it sets that gene up on that identifier up on top of the gene on your cell wall, looking for invading lookalikes. What that is called is sharpening your immune system by doing beta-glucans and adding transfer factor that you get from mother's breast. And that is a way of sharpening your immune system. Now, polysaccharides are great big long sugar molecules that have over 100 oxygen molecules in the complex sugar. And when that breaks down, it delivers oxygen to the cell wall that you can't get enough oxygen into your body. And what that does is it sharpens up your cold fusion process with ATP, which is where cold fusion occurs in the body. That was Kurvan's work. You got a Nobel Prize for that, turning potassium into sodium. And when you do that, weightlifters use it to make their best weight lift. They'll take a bunch of cordyceps and go pump the iron. And less than 3 days of taking cordyceps, and you keep a diary, and you can notice how you don't get sick anymore because of oxygen. Just that alone. That's why these pharmaceutical mushrooms like chaga and the rest of them, turkey tail, shiitake, there's 72 different pharmaceutical mushrooms that have been identified.
Get me some.
Okay.
You can grow them. They grow in your forest right there. Chaga is a conch that grows on birch trees. That's where you get your wintergreen oil. And what we do is we drill holes in the tree and we put a plug in there and it starts growing. And that's called forest farming. Another book I'm writing, how to grow these. And you've got 3 kinds of mushrooms. You have the psychedelics, you have that can be used in medicine, you have the gourmet that are like your morels and your chanterelle, and then you have your pharmaceutical. And all of these are part of a new set of foods going into the food chain that form in what we call mycorrhiza, or the gut of the forest. You know, there's a woman up at UBC that talks about how the mother tree in a forest talks to all the other trees when a storm is going to come through. It does it through the mycorrhiza of the soil. And the mycorrhiza is like the gut of your stomach. It's a hierarchy of organisms and resonant cavity oscillators dialoguing from one subset up to the next one. And that construct is outside space and time. And that's why intuition is when you don't make mistakes. Basically, they used to say that consciousness is a matrix, that we're in a matrix in the future where we have a video game that we have 100,000 lifetimes we can play, and learning mistakes and educating ourselves in terms of our soul. As a metaphor, basically, that is not incorrect as far as the limitations of man's mind in conceiving what's going on, as a metaphor. And it was Gregory Bateson that said, what is your metaphor? But to serve your paradox. So, of course, I have a paradox out in my meadow. Well, I'm just messing with you a little bit. You know, imaging in your mind's eye, that is where it all happens. Your mind's eye.
We're making all this up.
I'm sorry?
We really need...
We're making all this up.
Well, we really need 10-cent pieces, and we have a new paradigm.
Yeah, there it is, and you are correct. You are making it all up, and that's why I'm going to say this extremely important theorem. Man has a responsibility for the thoughts he chooses to entertain. There it is. Oh. Read it and weep. That's why all your saints in history have stressed the importance of meditation and training the mind. I'm in Satsangi. Yeah. I was initiated by Sharon Singh, and I can tell you that my life is blessed since I started that path of training my mind by the rigor of meditation. It is a joy, actually. It's where I can literally... I'm sorry?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to interject here is that with that in mind, and we're making it up, my theory is if we can wrap our minds around a paradigm, a concept of how our society is arranged, like what you're putting out here, that is a win for all. You know, not a win for a few and sacrifice the many, but a win for all paradigm. And so we need to wrap our minds around this to convince our ego self this is possible. And then we can actually manifest it and bring it down into third dimensional physicality as our reality. But we've got to stop having it in the duality, me against you, and the projection, I'm better than you, hierarchy. Is that something that we do as a society and make this is an opportunity as everything falls apart, like you were talking about stage 4, the economy collapses, but instead of it being a negative, make it a positive, like, yes, this wasn't working. these systems were
It
not
is,
working.
and actually, I'm confused. Paradigm, are you talking about 20 cents? What?
That's no, it was a joke.
I'm kidding you. I'm kidding.
That was a pun. But I do think that part of the problem is you can really look at it is basically hierarchy and using the monetary profit system, which means that not the resources, everybody who would be a stakeholder in the product is crowded out by the shareholders and their bosses, the oligarchs. And it's a system
Cyndi Lauper had it, but I preferred, Tina Turner when she said, "What's love got to do with it?" I have to laugh my way through it because somehow or another I don't have any incomes, and yet somehow I'm getting there, and I don't know how that works. I'm blessed, luckily. I have people at the last minute buy a book, or I have a patron that helps me underwrite a project I'm doing, whatever. But I'll tell you what, I don't think it has anything to do with money. And I know that Cyndi Lauper said money changes everything, but I prefer Tina Turner. And what's love got to do with it? I don't need money. What I need is positive attitude. When I have that, everything I see is half full. In fact, in some ways, I'm really blessed in that regard. I just choose to see this as an opportunity for children. We have screwed that whole system up enough. Schools don't even do mechanical drawing or shop anymore. Kids, Diamond and Home Depot have to put videos out showing kids how to use a screwdriver, for criminy's sake. That's nuts.
Well,
our children are too important.
You need to be good witches so they go out and identify herbs and just like in ancient societies, right? You'd go to see the herbalist who was accused of being a witch because they were curing people. So we just need to go back to the basics. But right now, we have twice the amount of people we had when we were children, right? There was about 3 billion people in the 50s and 60s when I was born, and you guys were born in the 40s. And so how do we go back to that? Is this depopulation bomb going to wipe out millions eventually? Get us back like after World War II. How many did we lose in World War II? I don't know. I could look it up. Anyway, what do you think's going on here? On some level, since we as a group, Gestalt, we're making all this up. And this is what Barry Gellis said.
Yeah, and we are buying into it because of the Internet. The Internet is a good and bad thing, a virtual universe. I don't currently use a smartphone. I have chosen not to go into those technologies because, in fact, they're toxic. Everything has an LD50 ratio, lethal dose 50. And 5G, seemingly, is one of the triggers that can cause this virus to show up here and not show up there. And I suspect that 5G is why we had an atmosphere keeping that technology from hitting the surface of the earth, messing up with our bumblebees, our ants. Have you noticed the ants in a cow pie are less this year than ever before because of the long microwave bands that are present for charging on the fly? The convenience of a cell phone is wrong. That whole concept needs to be revisioned. And that's my statement on 5G. There's a Dr. Beal out of Florida that has done dosimetry studies on different organs. And 5G is in the 0.3 to 3 gigahertz, which is synthetic telepathy, one of the bandwidths I used to create a weapon back in the 70s. And if they put that on every single household in America, they will have control. How many people in your neighborhood are currently on antipsychotics? Okay, with that question, basically they did the beta studies in prisons going from opiates to antipsychotics. And now all prisoners are addicted to antipsychotics rather than narcotics. And that's because they were beta testing that drug, antipsychotics, on kids. And 1 in 4 children on antipsychotics is unstable. And the next thing you know, they hear voices in their head. And if there's a high school shooting, there is always a second shooter in the first initial report. And that individual has probably got scopolamine or something equivalent that he tags that kid with so that he goes completely unstable. If they put 5J on everybody's home, you can count on that as a potential endgame weapon to be used for law enforcement and the rest of it. That's why we have our atmosphere, is to screen that crap from hitting the surface of the earth. And 5G, because it's line of sight, goes from every 2 blocks, you have to have a tower. And everybody will be exposed, and that's what the atmosphere was all about in screening us. When they did the early flights to the moon, going through the Van Allen belt was impossible because of the radiation. And that's why Cape Canaveral and then Kennedy was 5, 4, 3, because they had to blow a hole in the ionosphere to get a missile through that so that it would not kill the astronaut. I was at Mission Control in 1971 when Ed Mitchell did his thing around. And I can tell you that when Ed Mitchell came back, he was never going to have children again. We can't be in space because of the long ultraviolet and microwave bands that are up there. And that's why we have the atmosphere in the first place. And to have a technology around that system is nuts. And I'm saying it. That's me. And I can prove it because I did the early testing on it. And Beal, B-E-A-L, Dr. Beal, has a shitload of studies showing the dosimetry on all of these bandwidths. Cell phones are toxic. They literally are. They are. They're toxic.
So what is the goal? Is the goal to sterilize humanity, take over the planet? I mean, if you're looking at systems, and here's a system that is illogical, it's suicidal, but somebody apparently knows what's happening, and so it's blasting through everything. There's nothing to stop it. No legislation.
Well, yeah, there is. I just already know. We don't have a 3G, a 5G here in Grants Pass and Paradise. Oh yeah, let's talk about Paradise for a minute. When those blue beams were not particle beam weapons, what that was a smart meter that went unstable, just like detonating a nuclear warhead in the atmosphere and creating a firestorm. It went unstable, and the blue light was a microwave band going from one smart meter to the next, setting it off where 10,000 smart meters went unstable, and Paradise burnt to the ground. And the 1,500 people that are missing, you will find them in the ash. And that's, I believe, why PG&E pleaded no contest. 5J is toxic, unstable, and like detonating nuclear warheads in the atmosphere.
It's not an accident. This is intentional on some level.
Yeah, Paradise was a place where the Venusians lived.
Right. So let's look at the whole system. Like,
guess what's going to happen to Paradise is most likely, follow my words, they're probably going to give it to China because of the debt. Now, that is probably what's going to happen ultimately. And I can tell you that China right now owns 50% of Grants Pass. And I'm not even talking about our forests, the commie-opsis and that kind of thing. I'm talking about the businesses in Grants Pass, Oregon. 50% of them are owned by China. And this virus took that debt out, just like that. See, there's a lot of reasons that this thing happened. And I'm speechless, you know. And so what I'm going to try to do is outthink them and go somewhere that they hadn't considered, and using this as an opportunity to make things better than they were. And the first thing we're going to work with, if I'm going to work with, is food production. You do that, and you have already moved to 50% survival ratio just right out of the gate. Because food is going to become a serious commodity shortly. And if they control your food, what's going to happen next?
Oh, look at our history. When we were children, our food was healthy. It was all organic. And they've made our food toxic, and we're all overweight. And you know, so that was an intentional thing, design. This thing has been thought out by somebody. It's obvious.
Well, that's why they did the Bilderberger meeting that back in October, 5 months ago, planning this whole thing. Look, none of this is by accident. Right out of the gate, you know it's not by accident. So what actually happened, I don't know. I probably will never really know. I know that somebody got arrested from China smuggling it out of Canada. And Bill Gates owns it. Bill Gates owns the Wuhan facility. So does, listen, this whole thing stinks of high heaven. I know I'll never know the truth. But what I can do is turn it to an advantage of myself. And so what I'm doing is I'm going to start my own food production so that I'm a little more independent of Safeway.
Good idea.
Well, I don't have the answers. I'm going to hopefully try to contaminate some kids and let them come up with the answers.
Well, actually,
we had the questions and formulated questions. That means we do have the answer, but we're blocking it. Go ahead, Sasha.
Well, you know, basically you're implying the basic sanction is nullity. You stop participating in institutions that are killing you, and that gives you options. So that's the first thing, nullity.
That's exactly correct. Well stated. Yes. Yes. Go there. That's where you want to go with your mindset and your belief systems. And your belief systems, newsflash, are tools to be used in a toolbox. They are not absolute.
Where are you?
Austin.
Dr. Rick, you still there? Mad?
Yes, I am.
Him?
Did you? No, it's
okay.
Yeah, I'm here. Someone's trying to call me that shouldn't, and I'm gonna. They know I'm on radio, so.
Yes, Thailand, I am.
Well,
Okay.
Yeah, you guys have an opportunity because the islands used to be independent. They didn't have any shipping there. You were sovereign at one point with the Polynesians. And I think that Hawaii could become a leader in showing us how they did it.
Well, we're definitely, shut down. we're under pretty much martial law. If you go to the beaches, you get a ticket, they fine you up to $5,000 in a year in jail. So how are we going to get out from this? I'm not sure.
American Indians did it with the Native American religion. They created peyote as a religion, which was not at all real in 1948, and they made their reservation sovereign, just like you could do on the islands. And by the way, the Yurok have a port of export so that you don't even have to go through federal law out of Crescent City. Newsflash. There are ways to do this around federal law. Newsflash. Sovereign nations within nations. And your Hawaiians are real big on that one. Good luck.
I'm not big on monarchy, to tell you the truth. I don't believe that some people of certain blood or genetics are superior to other people.
No, but, there's kahuna on each island that are there to be the leaders in a religious movement that is outside federal law. That's how you're going to do it, probably.
Well, yeah.
You don't secede from the Union. You have an Indian reservation, and you run it by tribal council and medicine lodge.
Mm-hmm. All right. We have about 20 more minutes. So we were going
on you guys out.
No, I just want to get us. We're kind of going.
There's one thing that's been on my mind ever since I talked to Barry Gillis, and I wanted your flash on it. It's the idea that in the once it takes a consciousness to turn a wave into particles, and so that when I'm not talking to you. You and I are winking in and out from soul to material, and that we're not continuous. And I just wonder what you think of that idea.
So I would say to you, you are me, and I am you, and I am the walrus.
Right.
Well, at one level, we form the length, girth, and width of what it means to be human, archetypal plane of awareness. And that's 4 levels up in the hologram. You have your emotional, intellectual, archetypal levels of encounter. And the archetypal level is where your and my thoughts form the length, girth, and width of man. None of my thinking is original. None of it. I am a product of being human. I'm simply a lead scout, leaving footprints for the next person to write their books. I don't have the answers.
Wonderful. We can make our life sublime and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time.
Well, then that's what it is. That's what it's about. And by the way, in workbook 1, on the 8th chapter is Neurologic Circuits of Timothy Leary. He's whom I studied under. And I took my first hit of LSD with him in 1964 when it was still legal. That's how old I am and how weird I am. And ever since that trip, everything that I've ever done has been about inner space, not outer space. Inner space and imagination is reality. And whatever you can imagine is real is not only true, it's even more than that. It's like a gift. Where do you want to go?
Yeah, so what do you image? You image the children leading us to a new dawn.
Yeah. And I think that that's our inheritance, is our children are our single most important natural resource. And we should be treating them, teaching them well.
Yeah, or learning from them.
Well, there's an exchange. That's your inner child part that you talked about earlier. There is a relationship between your consciousness and theirs as a dialogue, just like your relationship to Janet. You have a choice when you go to God. The 2 paths on the tree of life are the hermit and the lovers. You either do it androgynously or you do it with a reflected mate, where that mate reflects that inner woman part of you. And you do the same thing with a child. There is a relationship, just like you have 2 brains. Into the out of. Cavitation.
Yeah, it's and the other thing, Rick, it's apparent that playing with children nourishes your inner child too. That it makes you feel good.
Yeah, but my little child is a brat, so I have to, govern myself a little bit. I get too overboard, and I try to keep the. By the way, the path that connects the hermit and the lovers, going right through the Sea of Karanzan or Doth, is humor. I don't know if you knew that or not. That's why I use humor. You got to laugh your way through the whole thing, because none of this is real.
Absolutely. In the tantra that I teach, higher than the crown chakra is the clown chakra. It's all just
an that clown chakra. Listen to you. That's wonderful. That is, by the way, Prater Akkad in his Anatomy of the Body of God, where he reflected the tree of life in 2 dimensions. What I did was I did it in 3 dimensions, and then I took after Roger Penrose, who wrote The Geometric Universe. I have written a paper called The Dodecahedral Universe. The universe, as we understand it geometrically, is a dodecahedron buckyball, C60, C120. It turns out you can prove that. It's very exciting what I'm doing, and what I want to do is give this to children and see where they go with it.
That's a really interesting. Carolyn Corey says this comes up with the same geometrical understanding that you've come up with, and says that's where you can find the singularity and the structure of everything.
Well, that's mathematics. That's what mathematics was about. And interestingly, base 3 doesn't have any primes, and it was Riemann that challenged the mathematical community to come up with a geometric or a mathematical expression for recurring primes. And over 120 years, nobody's been able to do that except Bob Marshall. And I'm going to write a book called The Marshall Papers. When I worked with Buckminster Fuller, that was the idiot savant he did. And Bob Marshall did it visually on a yellow tablet, where he envisioned a 3-dimensional cone with a certain pitch to it. And then he ran numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around in a different cone on the opposite side, and was able to draw a straight line through it as chapter 3, and how Riemann's challenge on mathematical community was answered by Bob Marshall. Nobody knows anything about Bob Marshall except his dodecahedron, his buckyball, and the concept of fullerenes. It's like some of these other geniuses. They get known in history for 1 or 2 things, and they did 12 or 15 things. It's interesting.
Fascinating. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, Bob Marshall. He was an idiot savant out of Fort Bragg. He's dead now. This book is called The Marshall Papers, and what I did is I had Dr. Lenny Time edit it with a bunch of hedonists, sacred geometry mathematicians. And what they did is they came up with a bunch of chapters interpreting his stuff, and it's amazing what this individual was able to do. When he worked for Buckminster Fuller, nobody could understand him, and so Buck brought me in to try to understand what he was doing, and that's where the buckyball and the diamond body came up. And what that diamond body did led me to 3 books that I have not published yet on the work I did for the military on video feedback systems, called The Diamond Body, Electromagic, and Yogatronics. I was using a Mora and Endomet German acupuncture to do wave pulse shaping to talk to specific neurotransmitters. And Norman Spinrad wrote a sci-fi book called Little Heroes, using the wire, where you could dial in the sex you decided you wanted to wear today, like whether you wanted to be a man or a woman. You can change it by just talking to a couple of neurotransmitters. And those neurotransmitters are what I'm talking about when you talk taking psychedelics, basically, that have similar but slightly different, like dimethyltryptamine. The brain produces N, N hyphen dimethyltryptamine, where most people are smoking it, like what Steve Blake broke, which was 5-alpha dimethyltryptamine. And they're just slightly different, but those are resonant cavity oscillators that dialogue with subtle bodies we have not even begun to discuss in normal physics yet. I have a Sifu that can knock a person across the wall just by his thought alone using chi. And you've seen it when Cassius Clay hit Sonny Liston, and Sonny Liston went up in the air and flat out on his back out cold. On closer inspection, you can say that Cassius Clay didn't even touch Sonny Liston. How does that work?
Earth punch.
Yep.
It's interesting. You know, I know that I don't know. That's what I'm trying to do is discovery and give this to children and see what they do with it.
So how will you find the children that are interested in this?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding. Say again.
How will you find the children? Who are these children? Where are they going to be coming from?
They're the ones whose parents are listening to this show and are going to my website then and register for Albert Schweitzer University. It opens Beltane, May 1st.
Okay, May 1st, you're going to open the university, and you've got it all
I'm
set
going to
up.
try to open it, even if I have one student. I'm going to open it, and we're going to start on Beltane because that's the May 1st as the beginning of new ventures. That's when I did my original bookstore back in Seattle and my herb company and everything. Everything always started with May 1st.
Interesting. So this show's right on time for you to start May 1st, and you've got people that are filming it. And a lot
I
of
hope some adults take the course and then bring their children in. And we're going to show them, we're making a video right now showing the children how to build an aquaculture system from scratch. And I'm sure that aquaculture system is going to evolve. Right now, it's a modular that we use in Arapahoe, and I have a 60 feet of vertical aquaculture right now run by 12 families. It's in Arapahoe. So you've got some pictures of it. It's very, very cool. That's one of many sustainable lifeboats that I've got around the country right now, setting up oases for when the grid actually does collapse.
So do we actually have to have a violent collapse, or can it be an intentional restructuring? Because
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Can we just have set our intentions around doing this transition peacefully with compassion,
truth
kindness,
and reconciliation,
love, like you said.
We have discovered that each vegetable has a specific light band or bandwidth that it prefers for most optimum growth. When I came out of grad school, the first job I had was at Boeing. Before the Space Center existed, Dr. Art Pilgrim had set up Lunar Base Alpha 1, and I was the physicist in charge of light, and it turns out that broccoli uses a different bandwidth than cauliflower. And mushrooms, each mushroom has a different bandwidth. So we're using LED lighting, which is cheap, and bandwidth specific, and we give the plant like we're growing it in outer space. All your inorganic salts come from 1/3 chicken manure, 1/3 rabbit manure, and 1/3 worm casings. And with that formula, you have a closed system. You need nothing from the outside. And that's one of the things I discovered working at Boeing before it became the Space Center down in Kent. It was in South Park, and it was known as the Boeing Scientific Research Laboratories, and had actually more PhDs working at it than where I had come from with old man DuPont working in Wilmington at the Experimental Research Station in Wilmington. He's the one that came to my high school graduation and then to my college when I graduated from Pullman and took me back east. And from then on, I was Navy intelligence managing bunkers. That's what I do now. I'm known as the postman. I go around to these different bunkers and I fine-tune their communities. I remember when I was working for Dennis Kucinich, he took me to one in Wichita where Arlo Guthrie, his daughter, and his granddaughter came out and sang a Little Americana. And let me tell you, that's where our future is.
Oh, beautiful.
Sounds great.
I didn't mean to overwhelm you.
I'm by Starhawk. Wrote a book called The Fifth Sacred Thing, where in the midst of a pandemic where everything broke down, the women of San Francisco got out in the street with pickaxes and broke up the streets and planted the streets of San Francisco streets when in the automobile age with their gardens.
This is going to be our future, where each of you begin your own food production and herbal pharmacy. That's our future. As I, at this juncture, at this moment in time, see it. It will evolve. I'm not perfect. I'm just another footprint.
Another footprint.
Let's see, footprints stay forever in the sands of time, which are free of our temporal. So Dr. Rick and Dr. Sasha and Janet live forever and aren't born yet and have died too, and we're simultaneously many places and no place.
So I really appreciate Amadpainter. You've got a real job to do, buddy. Yeah. So.
It does. So with this restructuring, besides food, we have to think of all, money and jobs.
Well, it's a process. You're not supposed to do it overnight. It's going to take time, and you just start with one thing. Start growing something in your windowsill before you go out into starting a garden. Start looking for native plants that are growing wild. That's a good place to start.
How would the average person determine the destiny of the plants around them, that they're safe or they're poisonous? How do you recommend someone doing it, like here in Maui? You don't want to just
the way I did a Navy SEAL, when you're out in the woods and you come across something you don't know, you scratch your inner skin on your wrist, and then you put the suspected food against it for 30 seconds. And if histamines form and it starts to pucker, it's toxic. If it doesn't pucker, there's a likelihood it's not toxic. And that's how you do it in the field. I've written a book called Native Plants of Commercial Importance. And those are the ones you can make a living on in every single environment, including tropical Hawaii. You have products in your forests now that nobody else has that are barterable. For example, you have cinnamon. And I remember, the old Anderson Ranch, Parker Ranch, it was all cinnamon until they logged it out. And now they hired me to put it in. Rick Vidgen down in Puna has macadamia nuts. The place is loaded. And that grows on that volcanic soil where you don't actually call it soil, you call it lava. So you are in a unique garden. Truly. You go to Lion Arboretum and you can see the diversity of the possibilities that you can grow just on the Big Island, on Oahu. It's unbelievable. Yeah. You're in a garden. Yeah, really, you really are. And the fruits and enzymes that you get from papaya that has papain in it, I mean, you have things that nobody else has. You're in a very fortunate situation. And imagine being up in Arctic Alaska.
Doesn't every area have its plants, even Arctic Alaska?
Yes, it does. That's why Gurdjieff said, eat your environment. Everything is there for you to survive, truly.
Right. And, all right, so we have one more minute. Once again, Dr. Rick, what's your website?
My website, I'm richardallenmiller.com, ALAN, richardallenmiller.com. I'm also on Facebook at DocRamCom and Sustainable Lifeboats.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.